Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Flash Forward. This week, we're going to be continuing the regular issues of The Flash. Last week, we did the crossovers. Now, we're just back to the regular series written by Mark Waid and Brian Augenstein. And these following issues are drawn by Paul Ryan and John Nyberg. So, we're kind of going back to this format of Wade has done a bunch of big events, and now we're just kind of doing little two-parters or single issue stories. Mark is kind of going back to, because at this point in time, Mark is planning on taking a break from the Flash, so he doesn't want to commit to any year-long stories or anything this time around. Because he's going to be leaving the title for a bit. He's going to pass the title on to Grant Morrison and Mark Millar, who are going to be writing The Flash for a year, and then he'll come back. So we just get some smaller stories. We start off this episode with issues 120 and 121, which are known as Presidential Race. It's a two-part story. But before we get into it, if you're watching on YouTube, then please subscribe and like the video and hit the notification button so that you can get notified when new videos come out. And if you're watching on Spotify, then subscribe to the subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and like it and rate it. So issue 120 begins with somebody playing with a top. And the top spins on the ground, and as it stops, you see a lightning bolt on the top of it, and then it explodes. And as we know, Barry Allen used to have a villain whose name was the Top, Roscoe Dillon, and he is dead. And there were previous stories where he came back as a spirit and possessed the body of Barry's dad, and it was pretty awful. But at the moment, he is dead. Wally is visiting a campaign for Cartwright, who is campaigning to become the president? Yeah, because it's election day, so he's campaigning to become the president of the city of America. And Wally doesn't really know how to feel about this guy. He kind of doesn't really like him. But he's at the rally in order to make sure nothing goes down. So he's running around stopping people from throwing tomatoes and water balloons. He grabs some campaign pins and pops them and stuff. And there's a guy with a megaphone who gets on top of a nearby building and reveals that he has a nitro bomb strapped to his chest, and he's basically Cartwright will never rule this city, and I'll make sure of that, and in order to show you what I mean, I'm going to cause chaos. And he jumps off the building in order to commit suicide, because as soon as he hits the ground, it'll set the nitro off and cause a massive explosion. And so Wally doesn't really have time to catch him, and he feels like if he catches him, he might cause the bomb to explode. So instead, he decides to use the campaign pins to detach the vest from the guy so that the bomb will, explode separately from him. So he throws the pins at the vest, which cause the vest to, come off, because he's doing it at super speed, and it's a comic book, so don't look too deeply into it. Causes the vest to fall off, and he catches the guy, and the vest explodes in the air. No, he doesn't catch him, sorry. The guy lands on the ground safely, and the bomb explodes in the air, and then his megaphone starts beeping, and it blows up, killing the guy. And Wally's just like, oh my god. I didn't even know the megaphone was tapped too. That sucks. Before Wally can think about it any further, Cartwright comes up to him and is like, thank you, son, for saving the campaign. I'd really love it if you were a part of my campaign. And Wally's just like, I gotta get out of here. I don't want any part of this. Please, can somebody get me away from this guy? And that's when the mayor calls Wally into his office. And this is where, this story isn't bad. But there is one part of the story that I do not like for a very specific reason. Is this B plot that Mark Waid and Brian Augenstein do? I don't know which one of them came up with it, but it's very unoriginal. Remember back in the William Mesner-Loeb's run, or maybe it was Mike Barron, it was one of those. Wally gets kicked out of, was it Los Angeles or New York that he was previously in? Whatever city he was previously in. He gets kicked out of it because he keeps bringing supervillains and stuff to the city, and so they just kick him out. And he ends up moving to Keystone City. Well, Mark Waid and Brian Augenstein have just decided to do that again. They've just decided to do that story again. And Wally doesn't even Wally doesn't even mention the fact that it's happening again. It's not like they're like, oh no, this is the second time it's happening, and we're going to point that out by having Wally say, this is happening again? Like, I'm being kicked out of the city that I'm living in again for the same reason? No, they don't say that. They are writing this as if they've come up with this idea and that this is the first time somebody has done this. Which makes you question, like, did Mark Waid even read the William Mesner-Loeb's run? Or the Mike Barron run? Like, did he even... Or did he just forget? Like, they're just doing the story again. Like, he goes to the mayor's office and the mayor is just like, Wally, you gotta get out of the city because you're bringing these supervillains here. And Wally's just like, I can't believe you're asking me to leave the city. It's like, it's the same crap. And Wally's like, I got friends that live here, so you're not getting rid of me. And he runs out of the office. Yeah, that really irked me. The fact that they're just redoing that story again. Like, come on. You're already running out of ideas. Piper is one of the people, like Hartley Sawyer, the Piper, is one of the people that is campaigning heavily against Cartwright, trying to defame him, and because he doesn't want Cartwright to become president because he doesn't like the vibe that Cartwright gives. And he's been spending so much time working on the campaign that he hasn't been neglecting James, who is his partner. He just hasn't had a lot of time for James. But James is fully understandable because he knows that Piper is very devoted to this campaign. And Piper heads into... he's like received the parcel and he heads into his office and he opens it up and he finds a spinning top with Cartwright O'Neill on it. And then the spinning top jumps out of his hand and starts talking to him. And it's basically just like, hey Piper, it's me, Roscoe Dillon. Remember me? I used to be alive. Well, I'm alive again. But I don't look how you probably remember me. And I'm just here to tell you that I'm going to become the president. And there's nothing you can do about it. Because if you tell anyone, they won't believe you. Why would they believe an ex-criminal? And also, nobody's going to believe a crazy story about a criminal coming back to life, switching bodies, and then becoming the president. You're screwed, Piper. Have fun. And he's like, it's been a blast. And then, like, the spinning top starts beeping. And Piper's like, no! And he jumps out and he's like, I gotta get clear before... And then he sees James enter the building. He's like, James, get out of there! There's a bomb! James! And then Wally comes in and sees Piper, going crazy. And Piper's just like, Wally, there's a bomb in there! And Wally's like, alright, I'll go in and search for it. He goes into the building and he starts searching everywhere for this bomb. And he's like, I can't see a bomb. I don't know where it is. And Piper was like, there was a spinning top. The spinning top is the bomb. And in the other room, the spinning top doesn't explode. It just goes, and like puffs into a bunch of smoke. And they go into the other room, and the spinning top is gone, which makes Piper seem even more crazy. He's like, look, it was a top. And James and Wally are like, a top? So they head back to Linda's place, or Wally and Linda's place, or maybe it's James and Piper's place. Who knows? And Piper is like, Roscoe called me from this top. He spoke to me and he said that he's going to become the president and that he's alive. And Wally and Linda are just like, I'm sorry, but we can't believe you because he's dead and you have no proof. And then Wally sits down to next to Linda and he's like, what about this Cartwright guy? Like, what are your opinions on him? And Linda's like, I can't tell you my opinions on him because I have to be as middle of the road as possible because I'm reporting on this whole campaign. So Cartwright appears on the TV and he talks about how he wants to go back to the way things are in the 50s. That's basically what he wants to do. He wants to go back to kids playing with toys. And Wally and Linda point out that maybe this is why Piper has a grudge against Cartwright, because Piper's all about technology and stuff, and Cartwright's ideals go completely against that. And so he's afraid if Cartwright wins the campaign, it'll set us back to, like, 50s kind of stuff. Even though I don't think a president can make that kind of choice of, like, getting rid of technology. But I guess it's comic books, so that can happen. And Piper gets really upset that they're not believing him about Roscoe. And he's like, you know what? Like, I'm going to prove that what I'm saying is true. And I'm going to do whatever I can to stop Roscoe Dillon from hurting any of us. And he's like, I can't believe you you won't believe your friend. And so he storms out of the house and first person he goes to is the Trickster. And Trickster's like, man, come on. We've disbanded. The Rogues are no longer together. Roscoe Dillon is dead, and I have all of the weapons of the Rogues and stuff, so there's no way any of his tops have been out in public, because I have them all. And as he says this, there's a nearby crate that has been opened with a crowbar, so somebody has also obviously snuck into, Trickster's house and opened up a crate and taken, well, it is presumably the tops. Meanwhile, Linda and Wally want to believe Piper, so they've been investigating. Turns out Cartwright has nothing bad on him. Like, they've gone digging into Cartwright's history, and he is just a really nice guy. And Wally has been investigating on the top, on Roscoe Dillon, and there's no evidence of him coming back to life. He's still dead. And as they're talking to each other, there is somebody holding a gun that shoots sound blasts, destroying a barrel. And Linda is like, we've got to do something before Piper makes a mistake and gets wrapped up with the wrong people. And then we find that Piper himself has created a new costume for herself. He's basically become the Pied Piper again. He's got a new costume. He's got like a new sound gun, and he's obviously going to go out and try to hunt down Roscoe Dillon and stop him. And that's probably going to put his life at risk. So we're going to find out what happens to Piper and this story in part 2, which is issue 121. So, issue 121, I actually forgot to mention that when Roscoe Dillon was talking to Piper, he doesn't straight out say it, but he's like calling Piper your kind, and I'm gonna get rid of your kind, and stuff like that. And the big revelation is that the top is homophobic. And that's Piper's real reason for... because he believes that the top is Cartwright, and that Cartwright is homophobic, and that if Cartwright gets put in place as president, he's going to, put gay people in, a sanctioned camp or something, I don't know. Put them in prison or whatever. And Piper obviously doesn't want that. Nobody does. And so he's going to try and assassinate Cartwright. So he heads to Cartwright's current rally in order to assassinate him. Meanwhile, Wally's in the mayor office, and the mayor is telling him to leave the city. We don't care about that plotline. As the mayor is telling Wally to leave, this guy comes in and is like, hey, the Pied Piper is trying to kill the candidates. And Wally's like, alright, I better go stop him. So he runs out, and he sees Piper on top of the building, ready to shoot, and Piper shoots a barrel of tops nearby, and destroys them. And then, so a bunch of the guys that are in the rally pull out their guns to shoot at Piper, and Wally tries to save Piper from getting hit by these bullets, and it actually turns out that Piper has a force field that can stop him from being shot, but the force field catches Wally by surprise, and he almost falls off the building, but Piper grabs him and pulls him up, and Wally's just like, what are you doing? do you want to end up in prison again? And Wally's like, it's better than ending up in a gulag. The top has planned for my kind. And Piper's just like, why wouldn't you listen to me? And Wally's just like, you're hallucinating. And that's when the police come in and they're like, hold it right there. And they arrest Piper. And Wally gets congratulated for Piper being arrested, which he hates because it's his friend and he doesn't want to see his friend get arrested. And James and Linda see Piper and they're just like, Piper, what's going on? Like, why are you doing this? So Piper gets placed in prison, and that's when a mysterious person shows up using the weapons of the rogues. This is obviously the person that stole them from the trickster's house, like I mentioned earlier. So this person breaks Piper out of prison using all of the rogues' technology, and then takes him back to his place and shackles him up, and then they reveal themselves to be Roscoe Dillon, but in the body of a guy named O'Neill. Now, O'Neill is in the running to be vice president. He's number 2 to Cartwright, and because of that, he wants Cartwright dead, because O'Neill wants to become the president, and if Cartwright dies, then it will automatically go to O'Neill, or Roscoe Dillon. This happened, so the body swap with, like, Roscoe Dillon and O'Neill actually happened in Hawk and Dove, and I completely forgot about it. But I had read it, because I think that was a tie-in or something to an event. I'm pretty sure I read it. Yeah, like, Hawk and Dove had, like, an antagonist known as O'Neill, and there's a big reveal that he was actually the top the whole time, resurrected in his body. It was whatever. I was not expecting it to crop up in the Flash story because I completely forgot about it. But yeah, O'Neill plans on killing Cartwright while disguised as Pied Piper because he has a device from the Mirror Master that allows him to make himself look like anyone. So he's going to look like Pied Piper. He's going to go into he's going to find Cartwright and he's going to kill him as the Pied Piper so that Piper gets framed. And then O'Neill goes scot-free and gets to become the president. That's the plan that the top has. So he puts on his disguise and he heads off and he's like, see ya, you're gonna be in prison. Meanwhile, Wally gets attacked by a bunch of guys who are apparently going to kill Cartwright and anyone that teams up with Cartwright. So they attack Wally, and Wally dodges their laser blasts and then jumps on their, like, they're in like a flying saucer thing, and he jumps on their flying saucer and vibrates through it, destroying it. Because when he vibrates through things, it causes things to explode. And then he grabs one of the guys and is like, did Cartwright send you? Like, did he set me up? Like, did he make you attack me to make me look like a criminal or something? And the guy's like, I don't know who sent us. They just kind of like, we received orders to go and attack you. We're not sure who. Like, somebody's paying for us. And then Wally hears like a beeping noise, and it reminds him of the beeping noise from the megaphone. So he realizes that the helmets that they're all wearing are going to explode. So he throws them all off, up in the air, and they are all bombs, and they all blow up. And then one of the guys, as they're being taken away by the cops, says, the guy, he didn't really say anything except he said something about how he was number 2 with a bullet. And that's when Wally realizes that he has an idea on who this might be. So we go to like the Cartwright's like rally, like his where he's going to give his speech, his presidential speech, and O'Neill is there, and then so like he uses his like mirror device to make himself look like Pied Piper, and he goes up to Cartwright and he's like, I'm gonna make you pay for what you plan on doing. Like, this is what you deserve. And he pulls out his gun and shoots at Cartwright. And Cartwright manages to just get out of the way, and Wally comes in and starts stamping on the floor to create vibrations in order to throw off O'Neill. And so O'Neill starts like trying to shoot at Wally, but his gun, like the sound gun that he has, blows up in his own face. Like the vibrations blow up in his own face, and Wally assumes that it's the vibrations he created that he stomped had like caused O'Neill's gun to malfunction. And so he runs in, and it also caused like the mirror device to malfunction. So O'Neill's true form has been revealed. So Wally runs in and just whacks him out. And then all the reporters start swarming in, and Wally's like, hey, wait, get out of my way. Like, he's going to get away. And then O'Neill manages to slip away. And as he's running away, he gets surrounded by a bunch of shadowy figures who say that they're going to take back what is rightfully theirs. They've come from hell to take back what is rightfully theirs. They beat the crap out of O'Neill, and they steal all of the rogue's weapons. So it's assumed that these are the rogues. The rogues have come back to life. Or like they come back from hell as hell demons or whatever. But we don't know what they look like yet. That's what I presume. That's my theory, is that these are the rogues coming to take their stuff back. So O'Neill gets taken away. He's blabbering about seeing like what he saw, and nobody believes him. And then Piper shows up. And Piper is like, by the way, Wally, it wasn't your vibrations that caused O'Neill's gun to malfunction. His gun didn't actually malfunction. I just shot sound waves at him from a distance. You didn't see me because I wasn't in the room. But I was looking in the room and I shot at him, and you just didn't see it. And so Wally is like, I'm sorry, I didn't believe you. And it turns out Cartwright is actually a good guy. And Cartwright steps down from being president because of everything that's happened. He's like, I can't do this anymore. You know, somebody has tried to kill me, and I don't want to run for president anymore. And so he stands down. And so Piper and Wally and Linda all head off. They're trusting each other renewed. And Cartwright is just left, his whole campaign ruined, despite the fact that he really was an honest man this entire time, and not a bigot. So, bad ending for Cartwright, happy ending for everyone else, and that's the end of the presidential race. Two-parter. I thought it was pretty good. The storyline, unless Mark really pulls something off with this whole, the mayor trying to get rid of Wally storyline that they're doing, that is just a rehash of what William Mesner Loebs did. Unless Mark really pulls it off and, does it better, I don't know what to think of this other than it just being a shameless copy. So that part of the storyline sucked, but the actual campaign stuff and the stuff with Roscoe Dillon and Pied Piper, I liked having a Piper focused story because Pied Piper has kind of been falling into the background, so it was nice that he took front stage in this story. So the next issue we're going to be talking about, issue 122, is going to actually be continuing this plot that Mark is setting up, Mark and Brian, of Wally being forced to leave Keystone City. So in this issue, we're going to see how that situation develops and see whether or not it's actually going to pay off. Okay, issue 122 of The Flash. So I've got a lot to discuss with this issue. As you know, the previous couple of issues, Mark and Brian have been setting up this storyline, and I've pointed out the fact that it's a copy of a storyline that William Mesner Loebs had already done. They're setting up this storyline of Wally having to leave Keystone City because the opinion on him has changed. They don't like the fact that he causes so much destruction. They're blaming him for the destruction that is caused in the city because he draws supervillains to the city, and like this has all happened before. William Mesner-Loebs did a story exactly like this, and it upsets me that Mark and Brian are just rehashing the same story again, but they're not even notifying the fact that it has happened before. Like, they're not, at no point in this issue, like, because I was hoping I was going to read this and be like, maybe they're going to talk about it, that this isn't the first time Wally is being forced to leave a city, but they don't. They act like this is the first time that this has ever happened. All it took was for them to have Wally be like, I can't believe I'm being pushed out of my own city again. Like, I can't believe this is happening again. But they don't do that. Instead, they have Wally's reaction to this be like it's the first time that this is happening. So the main story of this issue isn't that interesting. It could have been, but the fact that it's a rehash of another story, it was really hard for me to get invested in this. However, there are some redeeming qualities of this issue that did get me interested. There are some interesting things here that just bogged down by the fact that this is a rehash of a story that was already done before, and Mark and Brian, as much as I hate to be it, they're kind of being hacks with this story. And I think it's important to call that out. You know, I don't want to be doing this and being like, man, Mark Waid is the best Flash writer ever, and he's never made a mistake, and all of his stories are great. You know, if I'm reading if I'm reading a story that Mark Waid is doing and it's bad in some way, like this one, I wouldn't say it's like bad. It's not bad writing. The writing is good. The bad thing is that it's not original. And that it's an exact copy, almost an exact copy of a previous story. And I need to talk about that, because it's very important to me that I stick to being a proper criticism, like being proper with my criticisms. I don't want to be praising things all the time, and very rarely do I ever hear any actual critiques when it comes to Mark Waid's run. And maybe that's just because people don't read the stuff before it, so they don't realize when, you know, things happen in the run that aren't good, like this. Like, a lot of people don't read the William Mesner-Loebs run, so they wouldn't know this, which I believe, like, this is a little bit controversial. I don't know if it was controversial at the time. I feel like maybe they got away with it, but they shouldn't have. They should have been called out for it back then, which is why I'm doing it now. So, yeah, but enough of that. Let's talk about what happens in the issue. So the issue, it continues Wally's battles with the council. They want to get rid of him, and he's been visited by representatives of Santa Marta. Or, is it Santa Marta? Yeah, Santa Marta in California, because they want the Flash to come to California. They're like, hey, you don't have to stay in California. Like, if Keystone doesn't appreciate you, we will. So come here, come work with us. They even make like a little animation for them. I feel like the animation is a bit of a dig at what's his name? Sorry. There's like it's like a bit of a dig at what's the name of the Mike Wieringo. I don't know if it is, but it feels like a bit of a dig at him, because I remember, like, I don't dislike Mike Wieringo's art. I'm just not a huge fan of how he used to draw Wally West. He's gotten a lot better. But back in the day, he used to draw Wally with a massive chin, and I wasn't a fan of that. Like a huge jaw, very chunky faces. And in this, when Wally sees this animation that they made for him, that Santa Marta made for him, he talks about how, like, he's like, is my jaw always that big? And, like, is my jaw really that big? And I feel like that might have been a dig at Mike Wingert's old art. But maybe it isn't. I would hope it's not. So Wally contemplates moving cities because he doesn't want to live in Keystone anymore because he's like, why should I stay in Keystone if everyone's going to treat me so horribly? And as he's running through the city, he sees Team Turmoil, another example of great villains created by Mark Waid, except he's kind of leaning into it because he made Chillblaine, who was supposed to be crap on purpose, and Team Turmoil is supposed to be crap too. They're basically just a crappy Fantastic Four. Um, Wally even talks about this, how like Team Turmoil are like the forgettable villains. Like, so it's Mark Waid kind of laughing at himself, being like, "I get it, guys. I'm pretty bad when it comes to making. I'm not very good when it comes to making villains. The high points of my Flash run are not the villains. It's Wally himself." So Wally beats up Team Turmoil, and then this guy comes in and is just like, "Hey, Wally, I'm gonna be following you around from now on, taking notes on the destruction that you're causing in the city so I can pass it on to the council." And Wally's just like, what the hell? Like, why? I hate this. And he grabs the guy and he takes him to the council and he's like, who the hell is this? What the hell is this? The council's just like, hey, we need somebody to keep tolls on you to make sure that we know what destruction you're causing, so that we can add it to like our case when we decide that, like, because we're gonna do a restraining order against you. We're putting through a restraining order, and we need this as evidence so that they'll allow the restraining order to go through, when we take you to court or whatever. And this is exactly what happened during that William Mesner story, where the council of Brooklyn tried to get a restraining order against Wally. So they're just doing that again. Wally's like, I can't believe they're going to try and get a restraining order against me. I guess I really have no choice but to leave. I want to leave. And so he heads off and finds Linda. He heads home to Linda and is like, Linda, I want to leave because they want to get a restraining order against me. Nobody wants me here, so we're moving. And Linda is like, oh, you're making the decision for both of us? Like, I don't want to leave. I have a great job here. Like, can't you try to stay here? Like, can't we just at least think about it and talk it out? You know, wait a couple of days, see how things go. And Waller's like, fine, I'll do it because I love you. So something starts going on downtown. There's gunfire between the police and this gang who use like energy weapons, and Linda's like, shouldn't you be down there stopping them? And Wally's like, I don't really feel like it since Keystone doesn't like it when I be a hero. And Linda's like, alright, you can stay here and mope. I'm gonna be going down there to do my journalism because that's my job. So Wally stays behind and he receives a call from this guy named Dr. Olchester. And he doesn't even bother looking at it. He's like, I've never heard of that name. And he throws the piece of paper away, and then he goes to head off and be a hero because he at least enjoys doing it. Even though Keystone City isn't very thankful of it, he can't just let the police possibly die. So he heads off to this gunfight. He finds the gang, and he starts fighting them, and they start shooting at him. And he's like, you idiots, you're destroying this room with your stupid laser guns, and because of your stupid asses, the council is going to have even more evidence against me because they're going to blame it on me and not you. And so he beats them up and he takes all their guns away, and then the entire building blows up from, like, all their lasers that they're shooting around. Like, basically the whole building just collapses as he brings them out. The police are like, I guess we have to thank you for saving us, but we all hate you, Flash. Like, all the police are just like, yeah, nobody here likes you. And Wally's like, wow, I saved your asses, and you're just gonna be super rude to me? Alright. I'm thinking of leaving the city. Best person to talk to about this would be somebody else who also goes by the name of the Flash. So Wally heads off and he finds Jay Garrick and decides to talk to Jay Garrick about it. And Jay is just like, the best thing you can do, Wally, is just try to convince them that you are here, that you are good for the city. Like, Jay doesn't really have a lot of advice. He's like, we as heroes got used to the fact that like we never had to think about the fact that superheroes would come to the city and like destroy it and stuff. And now we're starting to have to think about that. Um, but you can't really control the views of the city. If they decide that they hate you, then they hate you, and you've got to make the choice that you think is best for yourself. But my advice to you is to just try and change their opinion. And Molly's like, I don't know if I can do that. And then another news story appears on the TV, and it's that Dr. Olchester guy that was asking Wally to come help him is rolling down the road in this giant ball because he was experimenting with velocity. So he's just going out of control in this giant mechanical ball. So Wally goes after it and chases after this ball and like diverts it throughout the city, eventually diverting it towards a golf course, which he then hits the ball over the golf course so that it will land in a bank, in a sandbank. And then he opens up the ball, and the doctor inside is just like, "Thank you for saving my wife. Sorry. Thank you for saving my life, Wally. I did this all on purpose because I wanted to force you to have to save me, because I want to take advantage of you." And Wally's like, "Dude, why would you do that? I'm gonna get in so much you could have gotten me in so much trouble with the council. Well, at least we didn't cause any damage." And then that little dude that's been following Wally around, keeping tabs on all the damage he causes, comes in, and Wally's like, "Hey, what are you doing here? We didn't cause any damage here." And the guy's like, "You didn't cause any physical damage, but the ball careening through the streets caused a whole ton of traffic, and now lots of people are late for work. And because he did it just so that you would save him, we're blaming you for it." And Wally's like, "Oh my god. So I'm getting blamed for people making idiotic decisions to force me to save them. Like, that's it. Like, I've had enough." And as Wally is walking through the park, this is when things actually get interesting. Alison Armitage shows up. Lady in the wheelchair that tried to sue Wally for ruining her life. Like, she blamed him for ruining her life, even though it was Razor that technically ruined her life. And she tried to sue him, and Wally won in court. Allison has learnt from her mistakes and that she can't blame people for things that weren't directly their fault. And so she tells Allison, like, Allison comes up with probably the worst advice that she could probably ever give to Wally. She's like, "You should just take the whole city of Keystone to court and sue them, because you'd probably win." And Wally's like, "That's not gonna help. I might win in court, but that'll just make everyone hate me even more, and then living here will be even more miserable." So he heads back, like, he comes up with an idea, and we find out what that idea is when he gets home to Linda. The next day, Wally heads off to what he calls work, which is just superheroing, and it turns out that he's decided to start living between two cities. So he's gonna go to California and be a superhero there, and then he'll come home and spend the night with Linda and have dinner and stuff. So his day job is in California, and then he comes home, and the only time he spends in Keystone is with Linda. So Wally heads off to California, and he's like, "I'm the first commuter superhero. Let's see how it goes. I'm looking forward to being in California now." And that's where the issue ends. And so, like I said, like, most of the issue is kind of just like rehashing what happened before, and I was really not invested. But towards the end, when Allison showed up and they did the idea that Wally is going to be living between both cities, I was like, okay, that's at least a twist on the previous story that was already done. Like, this isn't just a direct copy. We're actually doing something interesting. It's just whether or not it pays off. I am looking forward to seeing what happens next. I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, what kind of drama will come from Wally working between both cities. He's obviously going to be pushing himself too far, traveling between two cities at the same time, and at some point he's probably going to have to choose which one to focus on, you know, because he can't be everywhere at once. But yeah, in terms of, like, overall stories, like, This is definitely the lowest that Mark Waid has done. Um, and I guess that's the problem with starting at the peak, because Return of Barry Allen was amazing, and that was the peak. And ever since then, he's had like one story that was on the same level as that, which was like Terminal Velocity, and then it's just been gradually just like getting worse. But the series isn't bad. It's just stagnating now. Markway really needs to freshen it up a bit. It's very clear that he's getting. You can tell. He's getting like exhausted. Like he needs to take a break. This explains why he takes a break, I guess, because he was like becoming exhausted of ideas. Um, yeah, it's very much needed. It's very evident now. But yeah, hopefully, maybe this story will pick up. I guess we'll find out in issue 123. Okay, issue 123, and the story is picking up. Whatever Mark Waid is, he's building to something. So that's good. You know, we started off slow. We started off at a bad stage, but it's getting better, and I'm going to explain why. So Wally is living between two cities. He chooses to mostly help California, but he does help Central City whenever it's needed. And at the moment, it's needed. There is a what do you call it? It's like one of those. It's like it's not like a. It's not a weed whacker. It's like one of those farm tools that like. It like. You use it for like it's like a wheat thing, you know, that thing. I'm not even gonna bother looking it up. You know what I'm talking about. One of those is going out of control, and at the same time, a plane is going out of control as well. So Wally jumps in and saves both of them. It's a really cool like splash page of Wally transitioning between two different panels that are both situations and saving them at the same time. And yeah, then he heads off to California where he gets to see his new digs. He meets one of the representatives of California who introduces him to his new house, and she's like, "Hey, you have like an office that you can be in. Like, here's your office." And Wally is like, "I don't know if you guys get what this whole situation is for me, because like, I'm not a guy that really needs an office. You know, I'm running around. Like, at what point am I ever going to be sitting down?" And she shows him that she has an atomic clock, and it's the only thing in the office that Wally cares about, because he's like, "That's cool. I like this office now because I've got an atomic clock which always shows the right time for every like it shows the time for everything. Like for if I can wrap my head around it, it's like it shows the time for like the entire world on just one single clock, like all of the time zones and stuff." So they're talking to each other, and she brings up the fact that Wally's gonna get paid for being a superhero in California, and he's like, "Look, I don't want to get paid. As nice as it sounds, it doesn't feel right to get paid being a superhero." And as he's saying this, he's like, he puts up some portraits on the wall. In between each sentence, he like changes the portraits with his speed. It's a fun little visual gag. And she's like, "Well, if you change your mind, like the offer's there. California loves you being here, and we'd be happy for you to just live here for good. You know, if you were to leave Keystone City and live here permanently, we would love to have you because we love the Flash here." Meanwhile, because Wally is spending so much time in California now, Linda is getting a lot of time to spend with her friends that she hasn't seen in a long time. One of them is Fran. Not Frances Kane, the girlfriend of Wally West, who looks exactly the same as this character, but they're not the same character. Fran is a friend of Linda's who she just hasn't seen in a long time. So they go and eat at a restaurant because Linda doesn't get to eat at restaurants because Wally doesn't like waiting. She even says that. She's like, Wally doesn't like coming to restaurants because he hates waiting for the food. And then the mayor of the city comes up and is like, "Hey, I just decided to come here. I feel like being a dick. Like, let's hope that none of Wally's villains come to the city while he's in California, because if they do, then he's screwed." And Linda's like, "Look, you can threaten us all you want. you can't force us to move out of the city. Like, there's no law that you can pass where you can be like, Wally's not allowed to live here. Especially if he's not causing any trouble. And he's like, well, let's hope that stays the same. Like, let's hope that no trouble, like, he doesn't cause any trouble. And he leaves, and Linda's just like, man, what a dick. And then Fran, playing devil's advocate, is like, yeah, but he's kind of got a point. Like, you living with Wally, like, the Joker knows your address. I wouldn't want to be in that situation. And then she's like, oh, sorry, that wasn't appropriate of me to say, was it? And it's like, no, Fran, it wasn't. Are you even, like, are you actually Linda's friend? Because, like, that was a very snarky thing to say. So we go back to California, and Wally finds out that they have cameras set up in California that show him to the whole city. So, like, they're constantly filming him while he's being a superhero. And, because the citizens want to see Wally just being a superhero, and Wally's just like, wow, this is really cool, but it's really going to feed my ego, and that might not be a good thing. And then all of the citizens of California come around, and they're all like, hey, we love the Flash, yeah, and they start giving Flash, like, memorabilia and stuff. One of them puts, like, a Flash cap on him, and he sees himself in the reflection, and he quickly pulls it off, and he's like, damn it, the camera's caught that. I looked so lame wearing that. And then Wally's like, well, thank God that was caught on video, so tell me I'm not wasting everyone's time here, okay? Santa Marta's a little smaller than my old stomping grounds, and it seems more peaceful. Is there anything I should be doing? And as he says that, a T-Rex appears in the middle of the city. And Wally's like, wow, where did that come from? Alright, I guess I better stop this T-Rex. And he tries to run through the T-Rex's leg, like vibrate through it to destroy its leg, and he phases right through it, and it doesn't do anything. And it's because this T-Rex is actually a hologram, an illusion. But it's a physical illusion, so, like, he can't affect it, but it can affect the environment. So it, like, bites into a building and bites a big chunk out of it and starts attacking a nearby bridge that a lot of people are on. So Wally's like, alright, I gotta save those people. And he grabs a nearby parasol and uses it to, like, shove the people off the bridge. He's like, go, 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 get off the bridge, it's being destroyed. Look, everyone's gotten to safety except for me. And, it, like, the bridge crumbles underneath his feet, and Wally is about to fall. But the citizens of California, they grab him and they save him. He's like, wow, you guys are great, like, you saved my life. People in Keystone City never would have done that. You know, no one's ever done that for me. So Wally's like, alright, if this thing's an illusion, then it must be made out of some kind of, like, technology or something. So maybe I might be able to short it out with some electricity. So he grabs a nearby wire and he shoves it into the dinosaur, and the dinosaur just goes and, like, phases out. He's like, well, I don't know what that was about, but city's safe, I guess. And then we find the man responsible for this illusion T-Rex, a man known as Mr. Frost, who appears to live on the moon, but it turns out that he doesn't actually live on the moon. He's just in another illusion, which is the moon. And he wants to figure out why his T-Rex illusion has failed, so he goes and visits these guys who were responsible for making the illusion, and they say that the machine just fritzed out. And he's like, alright, well, you better fix it then, because you're ruining my plan. And so Mr. Frost walks away, and one of the guys that works on the machine tries to walk after him, and he almost falls through the catwalk. And one of the other guys is like, dude, what do you think? Like, what are you doing? Like, Mr. Frost is the only one who knows what catwalks can be walked on, because most of these are illusions. Man, we should have just let you drop. So yeah, this mysterious Mr. Frost guy, I wonder what he's all about. Meanwhile, Linda gets visited by her boss, and the boss is just a massive dick to her. Everyone's being a dick to Linda. The boss comes in and is just like, hey, I loved your article on the final night, but you're too nice. Your articles are too nice. You're being too sentimental. You know what? In this city, being sentimental, sometimes it, what does he say specifically? Yeah, he's like, watch yourself, Pa. You've seen how sentiment can go sour in this town. Just don't let it taint you. She's like, what a dick. How dare he say something like that to me? I wish Wally were here to shut him up. And then meanwhile, at Gamby Taylor, which means a lot. I probably mentioned Gamby when I did I think he appeared like in an earlier issue in like William Mesnelope's run. Gamby was the tailor for the Rogues back in like the Carrie Bates run, or even earlier than that. Like back in you know, back in like the old days of like the original Flash run. So the Rogues break into Gamby's tailor and they find his sewing machine. And you know it's the Rogues. You can tell it's the Rogues. They're kind of silhouetted, but you know it's them. So, are they going to be making themselves some new costumes? Because that's where the issue ends. It ends on that little cliffhanger of the Rogues showing up at Gamby's tailor. I think Gamby's dead, or just, like, retired or something. And that's the end of that issue. And I will say, that issue was the best one I read so far, because it was just a step up from everything else. Mark Waid is finally doing something interesting. When I read the stuff with Mr. Frost, like when this Mr. Frost guy showed up, I was like, oh, I know what this is. I know what we're going towards. This is a Truman Show situation. Mark Waid's doing his own Truman Show for The Flash. This whole thing with California, it's a massive illusion. Wally is basically in... my theory is that this Mr. Frost is creating his own Flash show by putting Wally in a fake city, and Wally doesn't know about it. And that's why there's cameras that are recording him. It's all set up. This is the Truman Show situation, and I'm really interested in seeing it unfold. I think that's what Mark is doing. And Brian. Brian's working on this too. So, issue 124. Mr. Frost, this man who has been using illusions to mess with Wally's head, has begun transmitting himself to... he's been sending these rings to Lex Luthor, Vandal Savage, and Cobra so that he can transmit them as holograms to him and talk to them. So, yeah, the rings act as hologram devices, and they allow him to see them and them to see him, but they don't have to be in the same room. And basically, he wants to sell them his hologram technology because he says that it can prove to them that it can kill superheroes. It will help them kill superheroes like the Flash, and he'll prove to them that he can kill the Flash with his technology. So we find that Wally is again being tricked by Mr. Frost. He knows that someone is setting up these holograms, but he doesn't know whether or not they are holograms. So he has to act on it and try to save people anyway. Because if they really are in danger, then it's not like he can't do nothing. So, yeah, he sees a building that's on fire, and he tries to run towards it, but Mr. Frost is messing with the holograms and keeps switching the city around. So Wally is getting confused. He can't figure out where he is. He's running around the city, and the city keeps shifting. And then eventually he finally gets a straight line to the flaming building, and he runs towards it, and he's like, "Ugh, I really hope these aren't real people, but if they are, I gotta save them." And he reaches out to this little girl who's crying for help, and Wally goes to grab her, and her hands go straight through his hands go straight through her. And so it turns out this entire building is a hologram, and all the people are holograms. And so Mr. Frost turns off the hologram, and the entire part of the city that Wally was just in was one giant hologram. So Wally's actually on the beach, and Mr. Frost appears in front of him, and Wally tries to punch him, but he goes straight through him because Mr. Frost is coming to him as a hologram, and he's basically like, "Wally, I'm gonna break you. I am going to be the one who kills you using my hologram technology, and there's no way you're going to be able to stop me because you don't know what's real and what isn't." So Wally heads back to his house in Santa Marta, where he finds his secretary, Monica, And it's weird because he refers to Monica as a blonde, but in this, I guess they didn't tell the colorist because she's clearly got brown hair. Um, Wally manages to make a connection through to the JLA computer where he finds Kyle on the other end, much to his disappointment, because he and Kyle don't really get along. And he asks Kyle if there's any files on this Mr. Frost guy, and Kyle's like, nope, no files on him. And Wally's like, well, that's put me back to square one. I guess I'm gonna have to just figure out what to do. Maybe I'll go tell Linda, like, maybe I'll go talk to her about all this. Because I need to talk to somebody about it. But before he goes, Monica says, like, oh, we're going to make a Flash movie. Like, we're going to make a movie all about you. Here's the script. And Wally's going through the script, and he's like, why is Linda's name Lindy in this? And Monica is just like, because it sounds better than Linda, you know, because it's a movie. And Wally's just like, whatever, I didn't sign up to make any kind of movie. And he runs off and he goes find Linda. He tells Linda everything that's going on with the holograms and stuff. And Linda's just like, well, you're just going to have to go back. You're just going to have to continue doing what you're doing and just hope that you can take down this Mr. Frost guy. I guess you just got to wait it out. And Wally's like, you're right. There isn't really anything I can do except just continue, you know, trying, I guess. So he heads back to Santa Marta. And that's when Argus appears. Yeah, that's right, Argus is in this. He shows up. I was not expecting to see him again. He shows up, and Linda's like, hey, Argus, you were eavesdropping, I see. Well, I could use your help. See, Wally and I are going through a lot of trouble. We got a lot of heat on our backs, and I would like you to use, like, your infiltration skills and stuff to see if you can help us get out of this jam that we're in. And Argus is like, you can count on me. I'm gonna go do my thing. I'll help both of you. And so he heads off. And Wally heads back to the city, and he doesn't know what is a hologram, what isn't. So it started to overwhelm his mind, and he's looking at everything, and he's like, those kids have got water pistols, but they could actually be guns that they're holding. And he finds that he's frozen, he's paralyzed, and he doesn't know what to do. And that's a sign that Mr. Frost is winning. Because he's managed to trick Wally into being unable to make any decisions. And that's when a bunch of bat-shaped aliens ships show up. And Wally's like, oh, there we go. There's the holograms. And then they turn into aliens. And Wally's like, now these aliens are either fake or real. Oh, they're fake. They're definitely fake as he walks through them. He's like, the aliens aren't attacking anyone. And they're not moving anywhere. Oh, it turns out they're actually leading me to this building over here, which I'm guessing is the Lion's Den. So he heads straight to WCSM TV, where Mr. Frost is waiting for Wally, with Lex, Vandal Savage, and Cobra all as holograms there, having a little meeting, because he wants to show them that he can kill Wally. Wally enters the building. Mr. Frost activates a laser, which zaps and kills Wally. And then Mr. Frost is like, see? My hologram technology worked perfectly. The Flash is dead. And he goes to kick Wally's head, and his foot phases right through Wally's head. And the three villains are like, well, I guess you failed, so screw your technology. You can have your stupid rings back. And then it turns out that Mr. Frost has, like, a ring on his hand, and it turns out that Wally has taken all the rings from him, and yeah, like, he took all of Mr. Frost's rings, so Mr. Frost's, like, holograms weren't working properly. And Wally is like, I'm super fast. Did you think I would just run in here and scope the place out and turn off all of your hologram systems before you even before you even thought I was here? So yeah, that's how Wally wins. He's like, I sped in here, I fixed everything before you guys even showed up, or before you could even realize. So your hologram rings don't work at all. And as a last-ditch effort, Mr. Frost slams a button which starts causing the building to go crazy with holograms, which are messing with Wally's head. And then it starts to like overload, and the whole building explodes from the systems overloading. And so Wally grabs everyone that's working inside the building, because there are employees who worked for Mr. Frost in this building. So Wally grabs everyone, and he runs out the building with them all. And Mr. Frost got away, but Wally's just like, well, at least we stopped whoever was controlling this building. I guess I'm just gonna have to see if Mr. Frost shows up again, and if he does, I'll take him down. So Wally leaves these employees to be arrested because they were working for a criminal, so they all got arrested. Like, he saved their lives, but they're getting sent to jail. And meanwhile, Linda heads back to their home, where she can't go into her own house because the house is on lockdown because they found faults, like a possible gas faults. And then one of the guys comes down and is like, Charlie, we got a new problem here. The boys think maybe there's radon in the basement. And there's like, no way. And so she's not going to be allowed in her house anymore. And that's where it ends. It ends on that little cliffhanger. But it's not even really like a serious cliffhanger. It's like a weird kind of like non-ending where Linda's just like, well, I guess I gotta go stay at a hotel now because I can't get in my own house. And yeah, that's the end of the issue. If that is the final issue for like Mr. Frost, like I'm guessing he'll come back, but as our final confrontation to that like 3-issue story arc, or like 4-issue story arc, it was pretty underwhelming with the whole Mr. Frost thing. But the next issue is going to have major disaster in it, so that hopefully guarantees that it's going to have some level of fun, because I like Major Disaster. I think he's a good character. And if you remember, at the end of Underworld Unleashed, Major Disaster was revealed to still be under Neron's influence, because he looked in his reflection and he saw the 666 on his forehead, which means Neron still owns his soul. So I have a feeling that is going to play a role in this upcoming issue. Does it? Let's find out. I was right about issue 125 being a fun issue thanks to it featuring Major Disaster, who is a very interesting character. So Wally is still living in Santa Marta. Things are back to normal now after Mr. Frost, so he doesn't have to worry about holograms and stuff appearing in the city anymore. But we're not focusing on Wally at the moment. We're focusing on 2 other characters. One's name is Paul Booker, and the other person's name is what was his name? Bert. And Bert keeps calling Booker's last name wrong. He keeps calling him Rooker. And he's like, we're both men of opportunities. Like, we always take the opportunity, like, any opportunity that comes to us, don't we? And Booker's like, oh, yeah. And he's, like, eating a sandwich. He's like, you're right about taking opportunities. And he, like, looks at his sandwich, and he sees a dog. And he sees, like, a bike, and a bus, and a guy reading a newspaper, and a woman carrying, like, a bag full of apples. And he throws the sandwich. He's like, you said it. And so the dog goes for the sandwich, which causes the girl to drop her apples because she's got the dog on a leash. She drops her apples. The apples fall on the road. A bike goes over the apples, knocking the guy on the bike off. Who, like, the bike hits the guy reading the newspaper, and the newspaper flies into the windscreen of the guy driving the bus, so he can't see. And the bus, he's like, here's a line of work I bet you never even considered, Bert. And the bus swerves towards Bert and smashes straight into him and kills him. He just smashes him straight into the building. And Booker's just like, hood ornament. And Bert, it's Booker. Or especially now, you could call me Major Disaster. And he grabs an apple and he starts, like, chucking it in his hand. It's such a good intro. It's hard to explain. I think you need to read it to really get, to get it. Because explaining it kind of takes the impact out of it. I highly recommend reading this issue already, just for that. It's like Final Destination ass intro. So yeah, Paul Booker, Major Disaster, is causing some havoc in town and killing people. Who's going to stop him? Probably the Flash. Wally's heading back to Keystone City because he wants to head back home and just be Wally West for a bit. But when he gets there, he finds that his house has been sanctioned off by the mayor because they found radon in the basement. And before Wally gets in trouble with the guys that are working there, like before he punches them in the face, Linda shows up to calm him down. And so they quickly run to find the guy responsible for setting up like the sanctions and stuff. And the guy says that like it's all real. Like they've all been given proper authorization to check out the building. It's not fake stuff that's been made up. And he mentions that he did talk to the mayor, and Linda's like, so you have been in contact with the mayor. And so while Linda talks to this guy, Wally decides to head back to Santa Marta to meet with the mayor of Santa Marta, who just happens to be called Mayor. No joke, Mayer. And Mayor is like, or I'll call him Eminem. Eminem shows Wally, like introduces Wally to this guy named Chaz Damon. He's a celebrity, and he's going to play Wally in the Flash movie that they plan on making. And Wally's just like, look, it's great meeting you. I don't really care about this movie. And Mayor tells Wally that they're going to be doing like an earthquake prevention machine, or whatever you want to call it. It's a machine that's supposed to be able to prevent earthquakes from happening. So Wally's going to, check on it and see how everything's going there. Meanwhile, Booker talks about how, like, he can see... What does he say? It's like, my power lets me get a read on everyone except for me. He's, like, looking in the mirror, and he's like, what is he referring... Like, what does he mean by that? Get a read on people? We'll actually find out in a little bit. The mayor of Keystone City is on the phone, and Argus is watching him because he's been sent by Linda to keep tabs on the mayor to see if the mayor is responsible for what's going on. Turns out the mayor really cares about the city more than his job, and that he's not dealing in anything criminal, so he probably isn't the one behind the house being, torn down. And that's when a bunch of the rogue's weapons, like a boomerang and fire and ice, start shooting at the mayor, and Argus comes in and is like, we gotta get you out of here. Some guys are clearly trying to kill you. And Mayor's just like, what's going on? And he, like, shoves the mayor through the door and closes it behind him, and Argus turns around and he sees the rogues there. He's like, I know you're pretending to be the rogues. So who in the blazes are you? And they're just like, blazes is a more appropriate choice of words than you could guess, fool. Now get out of the way, or we'll just go over your dead body. And unlike us, you won't be getting back up. And it turns out that it's the real rogues having risen from hell. But they've got red eyes, which means that they're, like, demonic or something. So, what's that about? How are they alive? Booker heads to his ex-wife's house. You don't know it's his ex-wife at first, but it is. Her name's Trish. She has a pet bird that really gets on his nerves, says literally everything that she says, like, and copies everything that everyone says. She basically explains to Trish that he explains to Trish that he sold his soul to Neron. And she's like, oh, what did you get for selling your soul to Neron? Did you get, like, money, jewels? And he's like, no, I got better powers, When I was originally Major Disaster, I had the ability to create volcanoes and tidal waves just by pointing. Now, my abilities are way more complicated. So basically, I can look at every single situation and figure out the worst possible outcome and how to start it, and then it'll happen. So like he doesn't create them, he just figures out how the worst possible outcome will start, and then he can, put it into action, like he did when he threw the sandwich. He knew that throwing that sandwich would start a chain reaction, and so that's his powers now. Yes, it's very confusing. Um, then Trish ends up on the phone, and she's got like a new dude, and hates her for that. Like it's weird. He's got a weird relationship with his ex, where he's like talking to her about this stuff, and then he's like jealous of her, and so he decides to leave, but she ignores him, because she's too busy talking to this other guy on the phone, who's presumably his brother. I think it's hinted that it's his brother that she's talking to, and Booker's trying to say goodbye to her, and the bird keeps talking over him. And so he like looks at the bird, and then he looks at Catnip, and then he looks at the meow mix that he's got in his hand, and so he throws the meow mix where the catnip is, causing the cat to jump up, which knocks the catnip over and onto the bird. The cage like opens up, and the catnip goes all over the bird, and then Polly's ex is like, "Polly, are you gone? Where's Birdie? What did you do with?" And she realizes that the cat has eaten the bird. You don't see it; it happens off panel, but it's like a shot of the outside of her house, and she's just like, "Ah!" And as she's screaming, Booker just puts his glasses on as he's walking away. It's so funny. He's got his glasses on, and he's just like, "Meh," like smiling, walking away from the house. So Booker heads to the place where they are making the earthquake device that stops earthquakes. That's what we're going to call it. That's the actual name of the device. Not really. He shows up and presumably kills everyone in there. There are 3 scientists working on this device. There's a bunch of mice and like a fire extinguisher. And like he enters, and one of them is like, "Hey, who are you? What are you doing with that cheese?" And then we don't see them again. So somehow Booker killed them with some cheese. So Flash like shows up, and Booker has like one of the scientist suits on, and he's about to operate the earthquake machine. And because he knows how to figure out the worst outcomes of things, he's figured out how to make the earthquake machine do the opposite of what it's supposed to do. So instead of stopping earthquakes, it's going to create earthquakes. His plan is to create the San Andreas fault, and Wally West has shown up in order to stop him. Why does he want to create a giant earthquake in San Andreas and kill thousands of people? Because he hates his ex-wife and he hates his brother. That's the only reason. Which is hilarious and also horrific. It makes Booker one of the evilest, like, villains of all time. He already starts the earthquake machine, which causes like a bunch of vibrations, and it really puts Wally off balance, but he manages to push through and get up to the earthquake device and punch Booker off, and then he tries using his super speed to figure out how to shut off the device, but Booker looks at the machine and looks at like a can, and he throws the can at the Flash, knowing that it will mess him up because it like hits the device and bursts in Flash's face, causing him to go like, "Ah!" So Wally falls backwards and he falls off, and then Booker gets control of the device again and continues using the machine, and it causes a massive crevice in the ground beneath Wally, which he falls into. He grabs onto the edge of the ledge, and Booker comes up to him and is like, "Red 3 in the side pocket. This will teach you to mess with the man who knows all the angles. Wave bye-bye now." And it ends with Wally's hand, like, and the crevice is, like, closing over Wally, and his hand is, like, the only thing sticking out of the ground. And we end on a shot of Wally's hand sticking out of the ground, and Booker laughing his head off. And that's the end of the issue. And we'll figure out the conclusion to this major disaster in issue 126. A really great issue. I really loved that issue. Major Disaster is such a fun character, and the fact that Mark Waid, like, he did such a good job mixing like dark humor with the character. I think Major Disaster works best when he is like a dark humor, like black comedy kind of character where he's killing people, but it's in such a ridiculous way. It's like Final Destination with the Ruth Goldbergian. Is that the name of the? Yeah, it's like Ruth Goldberg, right? Like the mechanisms that are like one thing reacting to another, creating a crazy zany thing. That kind of stuff. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing this next issue. Hopefully it's just as good. Alright, issue 126. At the end of the last issue, Wally was trapped in the ground by Major Disaster, presumably crushed by his earthquake machine. And as Major Disaster laughs his head off, he notices that Wally's glove has gone limp, and it turns out that Wally is underground, using his powers to vibrate at a frequency that he can cause little explosions on the ground, because when he vibrates through things, he causes explosions. So what he's doing is he's doing it at a frequency so that he can create little explosions that are just enough to propel him through the ground, and so he vibrates just enough so that he's solid enough to climb his way out of the ground while propelling himself with these mini explosions. And eventually he's able to dig his way out of ground. And now he's got to figure out how to deal with the earthquakes. Pulling apart the machine isn't going to do anything because it's already started. So the only thing Wally can do is try and counteract the earthquake by creating enough vibrations to neutralize it. So that's exactly what he does. He starts running around, trying to vibrate along the ground, and eventually he succeeds in stopping the machine, stopping the earthquake. And so he heads back to the machine to find Major Disaster, and Disaster has left. He's gone. So Wally decides to check on the city to make sure that there isn't too much damage that has been done to it. And while he's on the way there, he talks about how he's like, I wonder how Keystone's faring at the moment. And all of the guys that ran Wally out of the city, like all the guys working for the mayor, they're all boasting about what they've done and how they've treated Wally. And then the mayor comes in and is like, hey guys, like, I'm in a bit of a frantic situation right now. A villain tried to kill me. And they're just like, why is there a villain here? Like, Wally's not here, is he? And the guys are like, yeah, Wally's not here. Like, we drove him out, just like you wanted. And the man's like, that's not what I wanted. I don't want to antagonize Wally. He's a good guy. Believe me, if anyone's life was just made hell, it may have been mine. And that's when they see on TV, they see Linda Park talking about how the city is being frozen over. So there's a bunch of ice. The bridge has been destroyed by an earthquake, and there is a wall of fire surrounding the city as well. So, like, the bridge is frozen, and the ice causes it to break. And, yeah, there's a wall of fire surrounding the city. And because Wally isn't there, Jay decides that he needs to help because he's the only Flash available. So he puts on his clothes, and he's like, see you, Joanne, I gotta go help the city. And she's like, be safe. And he goes outside, and he finds Argus tied up in the tree. He's like, it's that Argus fellow. What happened to him? Boy's been beaten within an inch of his life. Who did this to him? And as he says that, Weather Wizard and Boomerang come from behind him and presumably capture Jay Garrikoff panel. Meanwhile, Wally goes back to Santa Marta, where he sees that the whole city's been abandoned. He's like, why did everyone leave? I stopped the earthquake. And then a helicopter is like, hey, Flash, you better get out of the city. You're in a lot of danger. You know, if you don't leave, your life depends on it. And so Wally is like, I'm the only person in the city except... And he goes up to the top of the building. He sees Major Disaster standing on top of a skyscraper, so he heads up to see him. And the silent treatment didn't work before, jerk. Maybe I can beat an answer out of you. And Major Disaster finally answers Wally. And he's like, you thought the earthquake machine was my weapon, but that wasn't even my main weapon. Don't you get it? I can figure out the cause of like terrible things happening, the earthquake machine was just an end to the means. Look, and he tells Wally to look out into the ocean, and that's when Wally sees a giant tsunami heading straight for the city. And Major Disaster is like, don't you understand? The whole point of the earthquake was to cause that tsunami. You were supposed to stop it. The earthquake wasn't supposed to be what destroyed the city. The tsunami was. And as Wally goes to try and stop the tsunami, Major Disaster is like, kid's doomed. Can't even see how yet. But I can. Someone's after you, Flash. Someone who wants to see you suffer. Because he hates you with the white-hot intensity of the sun. And he uses like a camera to like make some light glare in the eyes of the man flying the helicopter, which causes him to drop a megaphone. And meanwhile, Wally is trying to build a trench to stop the tsunami. So the tsunami comes in, the trench doesn't work. The megaphone that the guy dropped falls onto a mailbox and then bounces into the seat of a truck and hits the truck's controls, causing the truck to start moving. The tsunami causes the city to tremor, and a giant screen, a big flash-o-vision screen, falls on top of Wally, and he gets trapped, and the truck comes right towards him, and at the same time as the tidal wave, the truck hits him and it explodes, but instead of hurting or killing Wally, the truck actually blows up the flashovision, allowing Wally to make his escape. So, Major Disaster saved Wally's life. It's obvious that he wasn't supposed to die this day. So Wally escapes the city as the tsunami hits the city, destroying everything. Meanwhile, Major Disaster looks on and he's like, nice view. Reminds me of Venice. No, wait, Atlantis. My work here is done. I'm out of here. And he gets enveloped by a green flame. Interesting. And disappears. And Wally escapes from the city, and he is last seen looking out over the city. And he's like, Major Disaster was responsible for saving my life because he wanted me to see the destruction that I've caused and live with the guilt of that. Like, Keystone doesn't know how good it has right now. Like, it's a good thing they don't have me, because otherwise they'd end up like this. And it's ironic that Wally says that, because right now Keystone is in hell. The police are facing the rogues, and it's just like, how are 5 criminals who were originally known for just bank robberies causing this much destruction? They used to rob banks. Not like, you know, they're bank robbers, for heaven's sake, not killers. And as he says that, Weather Wizard strikes his car with lightning, and then the rogues all gather around him, and they're like, times change, rogues change. And it's assumed that they're about to kill Detective Hotchkiss. Possibly off panel. Is somebody going to save Hotchkiss? I guess we'll have to find out in the next issue, the beginning of Hell to Pay. A new story. Issue 127, Hell to Pay, Part 1. Something that's funny to point out is, so the cover of this issue includes Jay Garrick, Linda Park, and Argus being terrorized by the rogues. But Jay Garrick is the only one who has a confrontation with the rogues in this kind of situation. Argus doesn't appear in this issue at all. He's mentioned to have been almost killed by the rogues. Linda obviously appears, but she doesn't come into conflict with the rogues like this. So the cover's kind of a bit of like a mislead. Because immediately the story begins with Jay Garrick in this situation. At the end of the last issue, or towards the end of the last issue, Jay Garrick was kidnapped by the rogues, and he's been taken to some unknown place where they're toying with him. You know, Weather Wizard is shooting stuff at him, and Boomerang is throwing boomerangs at him, and Mirror Master is messing with his mind. And that's when Jay realizes that it's the rogues that have captured him, because he didn't know, because he just got knocked out and then kidnapped. But now that he's seen the reflection of Weather Wizard, he knows that it's them. But he's like, how are they here? How are they alive? They have to be dead. Oh Lord, they brought Keystone City to the brink of destruction. Gotta find my way out. Find Wally and warn him before it's... And then one of the rogues is like, too late. And Weather Wizard hits Jay with a lightning bolt. And we don't see Jay again for the rest of the issue. So it's kind of left a little bit up in the air of how he is. Linda is still reporting on the city. People are dying. Mirror Master is pulling people through puddles, presumably killing them. A lot of people are dying. It's actually later mentioned that, like, in the low hundreds is the amount of people that rogues have killed. Meanwhile, Wally is depressed after being responsible for the destruction of Santa Marta. And as Linda is reporting on the city, a medical plane comes in. And Linda's like, oh, that's awesome, a medic plane. They'll be able to help everyone. And then a light begins to, like, basically the clouds are forced to go away by Weather Wizard, causing the sun to glare its light on a nearby building, and it reflects off of the building, creating a giant beam that shoots into the plane, blowing it up, causing the plane to not only fall from the sky, but like Linda's cameraman said, it's falling towards us. Linda's just like, we gotta move, run! And as she says run, Wally senses that Linda is in danger and speeds towards Keystone City. And Linda's just like, Wally! And then the plane crashes into her, and her her jacket and, like, the cameraman's hat kind of flies out of the explosion. And it turns out Wally saved them both. Of course he did. And Wally's just like, thanks. Nice to know I'm good for something. And she's like, what? He's like, later. So Wally's like, what's going on here? Like, what's going on with Keystone? And Linda's like, it's the rogues. They're here. And Wally's like, that's impossible. They're dead. She's like, well, you know, rumor denied. For corpses, they're mighty angry. They've taken out Argus. No one's seen Jay? And Wally's like, you've spotted them? Who's your source on this? And Linda's like, an eyewitness to their power, the mayor. And meanwhile, at the mayor's office, all of his men are on their phones, saying that the mayor's too busy to talk, and Wally comes in and is just like, hey. And he puts everyone on hold, like all of the people that are on the phone too. He's like, put them all on hold, and then he talks to them, and he's like, tell me the situation right now. And he's like, well, because of you, the rogues have come in and started to attack the city. And Wally's like, because of me? I wasn't even here. So maybe this is proof that me being in the city doesn't guarantee that these villains are going to attack, and they're just going to attack anyway. And then, like, the guy that works for the mayor is like, look, we can talk about this later. Right now, this isn't a good time to have this kind of argument. And that's when some massive explosions come through the building. And it turns out that Captain Boomerang is outside throwing a bunch of boomerangs around, causing destruction. So Wally goes in and catches them all. And then he sees the rogues right behind him, got weapons ready. And Weather Wizard is wearing Jay Garrick's hat. Like his cap. And Wally sees it and he's like, Jay? What have you done with Jay? And so he attacks the rogues and he grabs Heatwave and he's like, where did you come from? What happened to you? You were dead. And that's when he sees that Linda and the cameraman are there, and he's like, oh my god, Linda. Like, Wally's just thinking to himself, he's like, oh my god, Linda, you keep getting in the way. Like, why are you here? You're in danger. Captain Cold tries to shoot at Linda, and so Wally quickly grabs her and pulls her away. And he's like, hang the job. Stop being in the middle. You're And the cameraman is like, a distraction? Look out, look out. And it turns out that Heatwave has blasted a nearby bus, killing everyone inside it. And Wally's just like, they were never this ruthless. These guys were bank robbers, for God's sake. They weren't killers. And so Wally tries to stop Weather Wizard from killing people, and he actually, like, cross-chops Weather Wizard's wand, destroying it, and it blows up Wizard's hand, but then his hand just regrows, and it turns out Wally can't kill them. Weather Wizard is like, you can't kill us, we're unkillable. And he'll start attacking Wally, and then they create a giant wall of flame, and then they all disappear, and they all get away. And Wally's like, look, they're not human anymore, they're supernatural, like demons. They have no hearts. They have no souls. Neuron. And that's when Wally comes to the conclusion that Neron must be responsible, that he has their souls, but not their bodies. Their bodies have come back to Earth, and because they don't have souls, they're unkillable. And Linda's just like, that's a new lead, I'm phoning it in. And Wally's like, I don't believe you. She's like, hey, haven't we already had this fight like 10 times? I'm a reporter, I report. And he's like, you're right, I'm sorry, it's just, never mind, I'd rather you concentrate on keeping a low profile is all. She's like, alright, if you go and figure this out, like, I'll try and stay safe, I love you. And so Wally decides that he's going to go and find Trickster. He tells Linda he's going to go find the Trickster because he's related to the Rogues. He has had confrontations with Neron. Like, he worked alongside Neron, so he's probably the best bet to go to find help to get to Neron. And when he finds the Trickster in his house, the Trickster has been turned into, like, a mirror-human hybrid. And he's like, help me! And Wally tries to, like, touch him, and his arm begins to shatter. And he's like, it hurts! And Wally's like, I'll try and find a way to cure you. I don't know how, but I'll find a way. So if the Rogues have come for the Trickster, then that means they're coming for all of the people that used to work with them, which means Piper might be in danger. So Wally goes to see Piper. He tells Piper what's going on. He tells Piper that, like, the Rogues are going crazy, and Piper's like, hey, I can help you create some sound weapons to take him down. And Wally's like, that's not going to work. See, like, they don't have any souls. They're essentially zombies, and they're unkillable. The best way to defeat them would be to find their souls and put them back in their bodies, and hopefully that'll undo everything. But Neron has their souls, which means I need to go to Neron. But how am I going to get to Neron? And Piper is like, well, good for you. Like, good thing for you. I was given a candle by Neron, and I never actually lit my candle. So I still have it. And he gives it to Wally, and Wally's like, Neron's going to be real pissed off when he finds out that he doesn't have their bodies. I feel like I don't want to meet him when he's pissed off. But then Wally hears on the TV that more people are dying, and he's like, you know what? Who cares? I don't want more people to die. I'm going to see Neron. So he lights the candle, and he's like, I'm going to call the Justice League so that they can take care of the city while I'm gone. Look after yourself, Piper, because they're probably going to be after you. So he lights the candle, and he goes whoosh into Neron's hell, where he finds himself in front of Neron. And Wally says to himself, he's like, the part that really turns your stomach is Neron's smile, and he finds Neron leering over him. And that's where we leave on this cliffhanger. And then the next issue, we're going to find out what happens when Flash comes face-to-face with Neron. So issue 128, Wally finds himself face-to-face with Neron, and he tries to convince Neron to help him. Basically, he says to Neron, he's like, the bodies of the Rogues have escaped from hell without your knowledge. You probably want them back in hell. Or, like, you probably don't like the fact that they've escaped, so I need your help. I need their souls to put them back in their bodies. And Neron's like, alright, I'll help you, but what will you give me in return? And Wally's like, I'm not making a deal with you, Neron. Isn't the fact that you'll just get them back enough? Like, isn't the fact that they're out of hell enough of a reason for you to help me? And Neron's like, no, not really. He's like, doesn't it bother you when things escape from hell and major disaster shows up? And he's like, only when it happens by accident. If I may dare speak on your behalf, my liege. And that's when Flash realizes that this was all set up by Neron. He's like, it was all you. You sent them to Keystone City. You're the reason behind everything that happened in Santa Marta. And Neron admits everything. He's like, yep. I'm responsible for everything. I set everything up. Do you think I gave your friend Piper that candle on purpose? No. I knew you would eventually get to it. I gave it to him so that you would end up with it. I've been playing you from the beginning. I've been playing the long con. And so, Neron is like, the only way you're ever going to get the souls back for those Rogues is if you give me something. But I don't want your soul. I want something else. And Major Disaster is like, make it good unless you make a deal, your whole city goes down again. Thousands of innocents, your friends, your girlfriend, what's her name? Linda. And Wally's like, you stay away from her, and he punches Major Disaster, and he's like, no deal, you're never having Linda. Never. I have my own allies. And Neron reveals Jay, all beaten up and bruised. And Wally's like, Jay, the only reason you're still breathing, Neron, is because he is. And Neron's like, I rather doubt it. If an elderly Flash is your strongest ally, you may as well surrender now. Prepared to die? And Wally's like, never! And Neron's like, never is a long time, Flash. Very well then, be gone for now. We will speak again soon. And he sends Wally and Jay back to Keystone City. And when Wally arrives, he quickly takes Jay to the hospital before he can speak to Piper and Linda about his meeting with Neron. Meanwhile, the Justice League are protecting Keystone City, where they discover that the rogues are unkillable. Kyle Rayner tries to kill Captain Boomerang, and it doesn't work. Wally explains to Piper and Linda that Neron wants to make a deal in order for the protection of Keystone, but he was like, no, that's only going to be your last resort. I'm going to do whatever I can to stop this. And yeah, the last resort is making a deal with Neron. So, and Piper is like, look, the only one here that's pretty much okay with making a deal with Neron is me, because I don't really have anything to lose. And Wally's just like, Linda, can you promise, like, not to get involved while I'm gone? And Linda's like, I can't believe you're just saying that right before you're about to go and fight demons. And Wally's like, I know, I'm sorry. Sorry I brought that up again. Alright, I'll see you soon. And when he leaves, one of them, either Piper or Linda, we don't really know, because they were really smart with this. Piper and Linda are wearing very similar clothing. They both got long hair, so we see a silhouette and we see, like, a shoulder with, like, the clothing on, but it looks exactly the same, so we don't know who it is. But one of them grabs the candle and presumably makes a deal with Neron. Which one is it? We're gonna find out. The Justice League continues fighting the rogues and saving people. Wally shows up to help them. He joins forces with the Justice League. They fight the rogues, but the rogues are incredibly powerful. Too powerful for the Justice League. They start summoning these avatars made out of ice and stuff, and the candle continues burning down, and Wally has only so much time to strike a deal with Neron, because if the candle runs out, that's it. And so Wally realizes that he's running out of time and he's going to have to make that deal. And so he heads back to the house, and he grabs the candle right before it runs out and heads into Neron. He's like, name your price. And so we have two conversations going on at the same time. So we have Wally in the present after he's made a deal with Neron, and we have the deal with Neron. So Wally gets home and Linda shows up, and she's like, hey, I know we're in trouble out there. We're all on edge, okay? If you're bubbling over with something, how about directing at the rogues? Have you figured out how to beat them? And Wally's like, I think so. I'll tell you later. And she's like, tell me now, or are you back to keeping secrets from me? You swore those days were over. You're asking me to be patient with your cloak and dagger routine again? Meanwhile, Neron is talking to Wally, and basically Neron explains to Wally, he's like, the only thing I don't want your soul. Your soul is worthless to me. I don't want Linda's soul either. What I want is your love. I want you and Linda's love. So basically, you're going to have to go back and you've got to ruin your relationship with Linda on purpose, and then Keystone will be safe. Are you willing to give up the person you love the most for the city that you love the most? And it turns out Wally agreed to the deal because he starts an argument with Linda on purpose. Basically, he's like to Linda, your life sucks. Your life is worthless. Your life completely revolves around me. And at one point, you're going to have to realize that there's nothing worth, like, in your life except for me. I'm the only thing that matters in your life. You have no friends. You have a shitty job. The only reason you have a job is because of me. Everything you have in your life is because of me. And Linda's just like, get out. Get out of my office. Get out of my life. And Wally's like, before I go, I want one thing. Can I have my ring back? The ring I gave you? The ring you said you always would wear? Forever? And it turns out Linda doesn't have the ring on her finger. And he's like, where the hell is it? And she's like, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. And as she says this, it's revealed that Neron has the ring, the flash ring that Wally gave Linda as kind of like an engagement ring. And it turns out that Linda had gone to Neron in the morning and made the same deal as Wally to give up her love with Wally. So they've both made the same deal. And Wally doesn't know this. And so Wally leaves, and Linda and Wally's relationship officially ends. And it ends with Neron saying, "It's mine now. Their love is mine, and it will be the key to heaven itself." What does Neron mean by this? We'll find out in the next issue, the final part of Hell to Pay. So, the Hell to Pay conclusion. Neron has succeeded in gaining the thing that he wants most, Wally and Linda's love. But why does he want Wally and Linda's love? Well, it turns out that Wally is slowly losing control of his powers. Why is he losing control of his powers? Because he's losing the tether that he has to the Speed Force. And why is that? Because he always says that Linda is his tether. And that is actually, that is real. Without Linda's love, Wally is losing control of his connection to the Speed Force. And so he starts giving speed to the avatars that are in the city. Because the avatars haven't gone away. Because Neron tricked Wally. He promised that the rogues would get their souls back, but he didn't promise that the avatars would go away and that the city would be safe. So the rogues get their souls back and they turn back to normal, but then Wally realizes the avatars are still rampaging, and he's like, damn it, he tricked me. Well, Justice League, we're gonna have to fight these guys, we're gonna have to try and save the city, and I'm gonna get my revenge against Neron for tricking me. But yeah, Wally starts sharing his speed with the avatars by accident because he's losing control of his powers, and so the avatars start speeding around, and that's when Linda tells the cameraman that she's with about what happened. She made a deal with Neron before Wally did to basically make Neron promise that he won't get Wally to make a deal for his soul. That's the reason Linda went. She was like, I'll give you our love if you don't force Wally to give up his soul. And Neron agreed. So Martian Manhunter and Wonder Woman try to slow down Wally because he's going out of control, and when they chase after him, his speed powers get passed on to them, and so they start flying out of control as well. Meanwhile, Neron reveals the reason why he wanted Wally and Linda's love to Major Disaster. It turns out the power of their love will give him the power to enter the Speed Force, because everyone who is a villain of Wally, their end goal is to find out the truth of the Speed Force and use its power, because the Speed Force is apparently so powerful that even the devil himself wants it. But Neron starts acting a little bit weird. He starts acting nicer to the souls in hell, which starts to weird Disaster out. Major Disaster gets a bit weirded out because of this. So it turns out Neron is being corrupted by Linda and Wally's love. It's corrupting him and it's killing him. It's making him compassionate, and compassion is killing him. Meanwhile, Linda admits to Clark and Kyle what she did. And Superman is like, look, you're going to have to tell Wally this. We're going to force you to tell Wally this so that you can figure out how to win. So Wonder Woman grabs Wally and Linda and in the lasso of truth and uses it to force them to tell the truth to each other. So Linda admits everything to Wally, and Wally admits everything to her. And that's when Neron appears in front of them, and they realize that Neron is dying. And Neron is just like, that which you gave me, that compassion devours me. It will be my ruin, my end. I have come to give back your love. I know you want it. You long for it. Take it. And Linda and Wally are like, no. He's like, how dare you die with me? Do you realize what you are sacrificing? And Wally's like, no, we're not going to take our love back until you promise that the city not only goes back to normal and the avatars go away, but everyone who's died comes back to life, and just you fix the whole city and everything, and then we'll agree to take our love back. And Neron is like, no, I do not accept this. I do not care about your pathetic city, your petty problems. And Wally's like, on the contrary, Neron, by your own admission, you care too much. And Neron's like, no! And he explodes in a bunch of green flames and creates a bunch of like his flame powers surge throughout the city and start repairing everything, and the avatars all get sucked inside Neron's body, and Neron is just like, "Congratulations, Flash. Throughout the millennia, I have made enemies beyond number. As of this moment, there is none I hate more than you. I will salve my wounds, Speedster, and I shall return when you least expect me. That is my vow, and as you know, I am eternally a man of my word." And he disappears. And then the Justice League is like, "Yeah, we did it. We saved the city. Everything's all good." And then Wally's like, "Wait, what happened to the Rogues? They disappeared. Oh, damn it. They got away." And Carl's like, "Should we go after them? Like, are they at risk of hurting people?" And Wally's like, they're back to normal. They're probably just going to do a bank robbery. I'll handle them another day. Anyway, I gotta say goodbye to you because I need to go and reunite with Linda. Something that's more important. So he runs off, and he finds Linda, and he kisses her. Like, he just grabs her and kisses her. And in Wally's head, he says, "I always said our love was powerful enough to beat anything or anybody. Guess I was right. Earlier today, in an attempt to drive her off, I told Linda that she had no life without me. That was a lie. The truth is that I have no life without her. My name is Wally West. I'm the Flash. And when Linda's in my arms, I'm the luckiest man alive." The end. That's the end of the story. That's the end of Hell to Pay. It's funny, starting off this episode, this is probably the most this is probably the episode with the most controversial, opinion of mine. Most polarizing opinion, because when I started this off, I was kind of up and down with the story that Mark was telling. But as it went on, he got me. And I was pulled back in. And, the issues at the beginning weren't that great to me. They were fine. But he really pulled it off. And, I said at the beginning, I said, if Mark is... The only way I'm going to excuse Mark for taking that story that William Mesler-Loebs did is if he manages to pull it off in a way that is incredible, and he did. And so, you know what? I'm still upset that Mark kind of stole that story still, but at least he did something interesting with it, and he did pull it off. But that's not the end of this episode of Flash Forward. We got one more issue to talk about. I saved it for the very end because it's not connected to the rest of the stories. It's Annual 10, which is a Pulp Heroes annual. Because that year, when they were doing annuals, they did a pulp, a pulp genre theme. So every single story was done in pulp style with pulp fiction type art. So yeah, we're going to be reading that. And the Flash's one is Lights, Camera, Romance, written by Brian Augustine and Michael Jan Friedman, with art by Dick Giordano and John Cassidy. And Keith Champagne and Steve Lytle and Jose Marzan Jr. and Joe Toyoto and Cam Branch. A lot of artists worked on this book. I was going to do a full talk on Annual 10, but I read it, and I feel like I'm going to save everyone's time and say that, I don't think I'm going to go through it and explain everything, because I just don't care about it. I don't care about it at all. I read it, and I was like, this sucks. Yeah, it was just more of, the Flash movie stuff. You know how in Santa Marta, I was talking about how, Wally's gonna get a movie made of himself called The Flash Movie? That doesn't happen in the main story, but it happens in this annual, and the whole annual is about Monica, Flash's, Wally's assistant in Santa Marta, falling in love with him and becoming delusional and thinking that she could become his girlfriend. She wants to she wants Wally to realize that Linda isn't right for him and all this crap. And so they start making the movie together, and Wally is the stuntman for the movie because he can actually do super speed and stuff. And then Rainbow Raider attacks the movie set and he steals Monica, and Wally goes and saves her, and yeah, it's just not good. It sucks. Yeah. There's nothing interesting to talk about. It's like, oh, they make a movie. Rainbow Raider tries to halt the production of the movie and cause a bunch of chaos. Wally stops him and makes Monica realize that he doesn't care about her in that way and that he is in love with Linda. And it ends with Linda and Wally making out. Like, just kissing each other. And that's it. That's basically the whole annual. Yeah, I didn't even really read it. Like, I read some of it, and I was like, I already know that this isn't for me. I'm not enjoying this enough to read it. Like, it's not even so bad. It's, like, good. Like, I was able to read Bloodlines and stuff because I was determined to read those because I wanted to see what they were actually like and explain them and see if there was anything redeemable. But this kind of stuff is just boring to me. Like, there's no enjoyment of reading this, and it's like, if I'm not enjoying it, why read it? And why even really spend, like, 10 minutes talking about it? Yeah, I would recommend just skipping this annual. I mean, you can read it if you want to. It doesn't even really feel like a pulp story. It's supposed to be pulp fiction, but it doesn't feel like pulp. I read one that was way better. It was, Dan Jurgens' Teen Titans annual that he did that was Pulp Fiction. And that one was all about the Teen Titans going to a town where they're all cannibals. And they like feed dead cats to people, and then they try to eat them. And that at least had like a pulp feeling to it. And it was pretty scary, and it was really good, and it was gross, and I loved it. And this is none of that. This is just like stupid romance shit. But yeah, that's it. That's it for Annual 10, and that's going to be it for this episode of The Flash. Sorry to end it on a bit of a low there, but hey, let's just forget that Annual 10 ever happened. The high that we ended on was Hell to Pay. Great ending. Issue 129. Mark really stuck the landing. Issues 120 to 124, I was kind of like, Mark was kind of stumbling along there. Like, it was fine, but it wasn't bad, but he was stumbling. And then he hit issue 125, and he found his feet again, and then he stuck the landing with issues 127 to 129. So yeah, that's it for this episode of Flash Forward. Next week, we're going to be talking about Genesis, the crossover event written by John Byrne, the man hated on Twitter for what he did with Superman. He wrote an event all about Darkseid. Superman is a big part of the event. It's a Darkseid event, so we're going to find out what happens in Genesis. Starting next week, it's going to be a 2-week event where I cover the first half of Genesis next week and the second half of Genesis the week after, because I'm doing all of the tie-ins for Genesis, because some of them are important, but also because I want to. So yeah, next week we're starting with Genesis, and once we finish Genesis, we're going to be going back to The Flash, where we'll be starting the Grant Morrison and Mark Millar run on The Flash. I've been so excited to get to it. I've heard nothing but great things about it. It's not a long run, it's only 12 issues, but I've heard that they did an amazing job while writing The Flash. They did a great job taking over for Mark, so I'm really looking forward to that. So and I hope you're looking forward to it too. So I'll see you next week for Genesis, and yeah, looking forward to doing that Grant Morrison and Mark Millar run. I hope you had a good time listening to this episode, and I hope to see you next week. Have a good one.